everyone, welcome back to another garden tour, or today it's going to be a greenhouse tour. I actually just pulled the very end of our garden, the peppers, out today. So we had some peppers. I think the biggest one was about this big, so they were pretty tiny, but those are all out, and that was the last food item left in our garden. Today I'm going to show you what's going on in the greenhouse, and I'm going to be moving a whole bunch of pots in here, harvesting some herbs, and then we are done with at least outside plants for the season. So Matt is kind of busy today, so you're stuck just with me, but showing you what's going on in here. Our sweet potatoes are doing so well, at least the greens are. The greens look wonderful. We haven't dug any sweet potatoes up. We hear that you're supposed to dig them up about 120 days after you plant them, but our weather was so weird. I'm just interested to see if there's really much of anything under here, and in the greenhouse I just don't really know what to expect. I really want to be harvesting and cooking some of these greens kind of like I would spinach, but I'm a little nervous about affecting the potatoes underneath. So if anybody knows if there's kind of a rule of how much greens I can collect without affecting the sweet potatoes themselves, will you leave a comment down below? I would love some help with that. So Matt dug up some pepper plants, put them in here. He dug a new big one up. You say hi? Uh-oh, what'd you do? What is that?
Rock.
A rock. Oh, I thought you picked something. So Matt dug up these pepper plants and got them planted. This big one he just dug up last week. It has flowers on it, and it even has a pepper about this big on it. So that's really exciting. I hope they do well, and we have peppers a little bit longer into our season because that's always nice. The baby spinach that Matt planted is doing really well. I wish we would have gotten some Norfolk spinach in, but we did not. So probably after we've harvested a little bit off of these, I will plant some Norfolk spinach. Matt also planted some butter crunch in here. I mean, it doesn't look so great. In fact, it looks like there's only one spot where it came up, but I think those were a little bit older seed, like 4 or 5 years old maybe. And then our collards are coming up. They did all right in here before. We thought they tasted all right, but I really don't think they got very large, and we didn't really get a good idea of what collards are like, since it was definitely something new to us, new to grow last year, and for sure new to try because it's not something we usually see around here. We have a whole bunch of red Russian kale. It's still pretty small, but it's growing well and doing well, and hopefully we'll be able to harvest it in the next couple months here. We have such a variety of how our carrots are doing. Our tomato plants are growing through the middle of our greenhouse, and on both ends we have carrots planted. On this end, the carrots are doing really, really well, but the sun, like I can tell right now, is really shining on them. Whereas the ones on the other end, we thought they wouldn't have as much shade from the tomatoes, but it turns out they are shading them because of the sun coming from this direction. So we knew the carrots in front of the tomatoes would get shade, but the ones down there are too. So these are doing really well. They'll definitely be ready to harvest before the others. And I don't know if you can tell, but our tomatoes are just, they're doing outrageously well. I am so excited for these. In fact, I'm going to be picking our first greenhouse tomato today. We probably have 3 or 4 I could pick, but we're having enchiladas for supper, and I think juicy, ripe red tomato on top of those would just be so good. It's probably been a full week or 2 since we've had a red tomato in the house. Since we've eaten a raw tomato, I should say. So our first tomato from the greenhouse, it looks pretty good. It's kind of heart-shaped. It does have a little bit of a crack and some overwatering issues, it looks like, on the top, but not too bad. I would say it looks pretty good for a greenhouse tomato. We couldn't remember if these were Italian heirlooms or Wisconsin Chiefs. Looking at the tomato, I'm guessing this is a Wisconsin Chief. It actually looks quite a bit different than the ones I planted, so I'm a little confused by that because those were seeds I bought. The Italian heirloom seeds, those all turned into those kind of purple belly button tomatoes. So who knows? I don't know if there were some issues with cross-pollination in the seeds we actually purchased. That could definitely be the case. But this tomato looks really good. I'm relieved they don't look like all those belly button tomatoes because we ended up having to toss about half of each of those tomatoes just because the green top had quite a few imperfections on all of them, and then the little belly button on the bottom had to be cut off. So that's all that's going on in our greenhouse currently, but I haven't actually moved any of our herbs yet, and it is Monday today, and I believe Thursday night we are expecting a frost. So I definitely want to get some of these herbs moved in to save them, to try to just make them last a little bit longer, or some maybe even through the winter. I'm not really sure exactly what I'm doing with them yet, but I kind of want to save them. So after I brought everything in here and put it along this side, I realized it might actually make more sense that I put it on this side where the carrots are and the tomatoes, because they're going to be a little bit easier to pick and not something we're constantly picking from like our greens over here. But I can certainly move this. I actually need to do a lot of cleaning, if you can tell in here, and just kind of organizing and cleaning up before it gets too cold, although it should probably be pretty warm in here. But let me show you what I brought in. So our chives never really grew flowers, which kind of stinks, but I definitely overplanted them. I think it'll be really fun to kind of split these up and spread them out a bit. Next year we are hoping to build some herb beds, so if any of these last through the winter, I'll be able to transplant some over there. But for how well the herbs did with really very little from me, I would say I'm not worried if I have to start all of them over, but the chives will be fun to get some flowers hopefully next year, and they're just pretty. I think the bees will like them and all that good stuff. The thyme here, I have to tell you, it has such a huge root system. It was really deep in the ground, and I was just watching a video the other day on YouTube. I cannot remember her name, so if you know her name you can leave a comment down below, but I cannot remember her name. And she was discussing in length about understanding root systems of plants so that you can plant efficiently, just making sure you are planting a lot in a small spot if that's all you have. And I was shocked to see that the thyme had such a deep root system. I mean, albeit skinny, it was very deep. So it just makes me stop and think about it, because you just assume that the herbs have just shallow root systems, and that definitely wasn't the case for these. So just kind of fun knowledge. The fennel is doing so well. It smells amazing. I'm actually hoping to save these seeds at the top here once they're done and dried out for fennel seed for making sausage and eggs and things. Our oregano is still doing really well, so we are definitely going to be harvesting a lot more from here. I'm really excited for this. I think it's nice that I'll be able to dry quite a bit of this, because we certainly use a ton of it when it comes to pizza and pasta. I was not super loving our basil this year. I just didn't like the flavor. There's actually 2 varieties in this pot, but it grew so large and beautiful, and the bees love it. So I might just kind of transplant it out if it makes it through the winter, so that they can have that next year. The chamomile is almost done, but I have a little bit here to harvest off of. I didn't actually save any chamomile seeds, but I don't believe I planted all of it this year. So that was something kind of fun to do. I actually really just like how the flowers look. Same with the calendula. I just really like how the flowers look. So I might plant it just for that purpose in the future. I saved a bunch of calendula flowers to try for teas or salves and stuff. But I don't know how much time and how realistic that is for me to do some of those things. And I really don't drink much tea. I keep trying to become a tea drinker, but I am not yet. Our lavender, I mean, last year our lavender never flowered, but it smelled so good. This year we've had so much flowering on our plant, so it's been fun. Again, I've been saving a lot of these. I probably will just kind of make something more potpourri, like just smell good stuff with it. But I definitely saved it, dried it for, again, that same kind of stuff. We have already harvested and saved a lot of sage, but there's still a little bit more on here This ended up with a little bit more bug damage than some of the other plants, so I'm not really sure what likes sage, but something certainly does. And those pretty calendula flowers, been letting them kind of die now just so I can have some seed, because this just grew really, really well, and so it's been kind of fun to have. And this is my very overplanted green onions. So much dead stuff on here. I actually have not harvested any of these green onions at all. We have had so much onion, what a blessing, that I haven't harvested anything from here. I'll just take some of these out so it's got some room. But my plan is to either come down here, cut all these, and freeze them, or dehydrate them. I haven't decided yet, and then just kind of store them in a jar, or grind them up for some onion powder. But I can't believe we haven't even touched these all year. Hi. They smell like onions now. Almost forgot our little parsley plant. Doing well too. So I didn't actually realize that you are supposed to plant shallots in the fall rather than the spring, but I have to show you this shallot we planted in the spring. Oh my gosh. Oh, maybe it's an onion. Guys, I think it's an onion. Anyways, I planted onions and shallots in here, and I thought this was a shallot, but now that I'm looking at it, I think it might actually be an onion. But the greens are so big. There's nothing really much for the bottom. But look at all these little baby onions. These just kind of self-seeded themselves. This planter's a little too big for me to carry in there, so these probably will die off, or maybe they'll come back next year, but we'll see. I did try my hand at propagating some apple and pear trees, some peach trees this year, and they're kind of all sitting here, and I don't think really much of anything happened with any of them, so that was an epic fail. But you know what, we live, we learn, and so I'll have to get this cleaned up here soon. I also had some onions that I just didn't have room for in the garden, which is funny now because we didn't really end up getting that many onions from our garden. So I just kind of plopped them in pots here, and they're in the shade, and they really didn't do well. So I'm going to pull out those little onion bulbs, plant them next year for seed for onion. So that's it for today's garden tour, greenhouse tour. Glad you got to see me again. Bye guys.